Across southern India, farmers are raising their voices in protest. They are deeply concerned about genetically modified crops or GM crops, which they believe could threaten their livelihoods, independence, and the environment. But why are these crops causing such a stir? And what exactly are GM crops? So hi, hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host Rohit Sharma and you're watching Freedom Farming English channel. So today we are diving deep into the details, exploring the pros and cons, and understanding the reasons behind these protests. What are GM crops? Genetically modified crops are plants whose DNA has been altered using genetic engineering technique. These modifications are often done to improve a plant's resistance to pests, enhance its nutritional content, or make it more tolerant to harsh environmental conditions like drought. This process involves introducing new genes into the plant, often from other species, to achieve the desired traits. Globally, crops like soybeans, corn, cotton, and canola have been the most commonly modified. GM crops are designed to increase efficiency in farming and reduce the dependence on pesticides, fertilizers, and other chemicals. The pros of GM crops: there are undeniable advantages of using genetically modified crops, especially in the world with increasing food demands. Let's break down some of the key benefits. Increased yield. GM crops are often engineered to produce high yields compared to traditional crops. For farmers, this means more food per acre of land, which is crucial as global populations rise and arable land becomes limited. Pest resistance. Many GM crops like BT cotton have been engineered to be resistant to specific pests. The plant produces a protein toxic to pests but harmless to humans. This reduces the need for chemical pesticides, lowering farming costs and environmental damage. Drought and climate resilience. With the ongoing effects of climate change, drought-tolerant GM crops are becoming vital. These crops require less water, making farming more visible in regions prone to water shortages. Enhanced nutritional content. Some GM crops are fortified with vitamins and nutrients. For instance, golden rice has been engineered to certain beta-carotene, addressing vitamin A deficiency in developing countries. Reduced environmental impact. Fewer pesticides and less land needed for farming mean a reduced environmental footprint. GM crops can contribute to sustainable agricultural practices. But, however, not everything about GM crops is positive. There are significant concerns and risks, particularly voiced by the farming community, environmentalists, and consumer rights groups. Here are some of the major disadvantages as well. Corporate control of seeds. One of the main concerns in the GM seeds are often patent and controlled by large corporations. Farmers need seeds every season rather than saving seeds from their harvest. This dependence can trap farmers in a cycle of debt and reduce their autonomy. Environmental impact and superweeds. While GM crops reduce the need for pesticides, they can lead to the development of superweeds, weeds that develop resistance to herbicides over time. This can result in an even greater reliance on chemicals, defeating one of the original purposes of GM crops. Loss of biodiversity. As GM crops spread, there's a risk of reducing the biodiversity of plants. Natural crop varieties which have been grown for centuries and are adapted to local conditions may be displaced by GM varieties, endangering traditional agricultural practices. Health concerns. Although there is no conclusive scientific evidence linking GM foods to health risks, some groups worry about potential long-term effects. Concerns about allergies, antibiotics, resistance, and unknown reactions persist among skeptics. Contamination of non-GM crops. Another issue is cross-pollination. Pollen from GM crops can travel and potentially contaminate non-GM or organic fields. This is a serious concern for organic farmers who risk losing their certification if their crops are found to contain GM material. Now let's talk upon the protest and the farmer concerns. In India, especially in the southern states, the debate over GM crops have intensified. Farmers associations have united to protest against the spread of GM crops. But what exactly are they concerned about? Loss of independence to corporation. Farmers argue that GM crops, often controlled by large multinational corporations, take away their independence. Once they adopt GM crops, farmers are bound by licensing agreements and they cannot save seed for the next planting season. Next comes a fear of contamination. Many farmers in India rely on organic farming and traditional crop varieties. They fear that the introduction of GM crop will lead to genetic contamination, making it possible to maintain organic certification or sell crops in non-GM markets. Next comes up our economic risks. Farmers also highlight the economic risks. GM seeds are typically more expensive than traditional seed, combined with the need to buy new seeds each year. The financial burden increases, especially if the crops fall due to unexpected weather or pest problems. Next, we have environmental concerns. Farmers are concerned about the long-term environmental impact, particularly the development of superweeds and soil degradation. They believe that these problems will outweigh the short-term benefits of GM crops. And these protests have led to calls for nationwide consultations before the further GM crops are introduced into India's agricultural landscape. The farmers argue that any decision on GM crop should be based on long-term environmental sustainability and the protection of farmer rights. But that's not all. Now let's talk about the future of GM crops in India. The debate on GM crops in India continues with both strong support and opposition. The future of GM crops is uncertain. On one hand, proponents argue that GM technology is crucial for the future of agriculture, especially in a world facing climate change and food scarcity. On the other hand, the concerns raised by farmers and environmentalists must be addressed if GM crops are to play a sustainable role in India's agriculture. Ultimately, the decision rests on a delicate balance between technology, economics, and the well-being of farmers. What do you think? Should India fully embrace GM crops, or should it proceed with caution? So if you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Let's continue the conversation about the future of farming in the comments below. And not only that, if you like mushrooms or want to do mushroom farming and make good money, then download the Freedom app and subscribe to the course, where you will find experts giving you information about the things in detail from start to the end. So please download the Freedom app right now and subscribe to the course right away. Happy farming!